As we've discussed, each detail of the prophecy recorded at Daniel 11 has come true so far. We must have confidence that the remaining events described in that prophecy will also come true. We are living in the last days of the time of the end. Soon, the nations will fulfill the prophecy at 1 Thessalonians 5:3. Whenever it is that they are saying peace and security, then sudden destruction is to be instantly on them, just like birth pains on a pregnant woman, and they will by no means escape. Then, sudden destruction comes upon all parts of Satan's system. As you can see on the screen, Daniel 12:1 says, "During that time, Michael will stand up, the great prince who is standing in behalf of your people, and there will occur a time of distress such as has not occurred since there came to be a nation until that time. And during that time, your people will escape, everyone who is found written down in the book."
That leads us into our third point. How should knowing the information that we have just discussed affect the decisions that we make? Well, what we have reviewed is not just interesting history, it's a dramatic prelude to what will soon happen here on earth. Jehovah has given his people this knowledge so that we can act on it. It should influence the choices we make.
Now, wait a minute. Let's think about that a minute.
Jehovah has given his people this knowledge. It should influence the choices we make. Well, isn't that what all of this is about, viewers? Terrifying people. Using these obscure verses in the Bible, which have been used by generation after generation throughout history to suggest that the last days are coming, the second coming of Christ is imminent, everything's going to be destroyed, Armageddon's on the way. Indeed, in the lifetime of the organization, in the history of Jehovah's Witnesses, they have had the same level of urgency, this same insistence that all of these things are going to happen imminently for decades. For over decades and decades of literature, they've been using this sort of fear-mongering with this sort of urgency to say, these are the last days, all of this is going to happen imminently. What are you waiting for? You need to serve us. You need to let our interpretation of Bible prophecy influence your decisions so that you serve us, so that you commit as much time and as much energy as possible to doing what we tell you to do. 140 years worth of literature, all saying the same thing. The end is coming now. We're living now in the time of the end. What did Kenneth Cook say? We are living in the last days of the time of the end, which reminded me of Stephen Lett saying very similar words recently.
So the events unfolding around us are making clearer than ever that we're living in the final part of the last days, undoubtedly the final part of the final part of the last days, shortly before the last day of the last days.
Viewers, stuff like this is going to age like milk, because this video footage, these JW Broadcasting episodes, they're going to stick around, and they're going to be watched by people hundreds of years from now who are going to be doubled over in stitches at the fanaticism and at the obvious coercion of these charlatans who are using these Bible verses, these obscure prophetic texts, to control people and terrify them.
Bible prophecy shows that in the near future, the nations will turn on all false religions and wipe them out. Then they will launch a final attack on God's people. And what a mistake that will be! As discussed in the Pure Worship book, Jehovah will respond to that attack by unleashing his rage on the nations. After the dust of Armageddon settles, those with the earthly hope can look forward to 1,000 years of genuine peace and security, working under the rule of God's kingdom. Before that time comes, we will continue to face trials and opposition, but we can endure. We have many modern-day examples that we can imitate right now. Those examples can help all of us to be prepared, to stand firm, and to remain fully united in the faith. Herman, it's been a pleasure reviewing this exciting material about the King of the North with you.
Thank you, Ken. This information is so important. It helps all of us to face the future with confidence.
Or, to be more exact, Herman, it helps millions of Jehovah's Witnesses to stay indoctrinated. That's what all of this is. Again, it's about terrifying Jehovah's Witnesses into thinking that the end is coming soon, or the end is coming in the near future. If that's your best way of motivating people, of literally saying to 8.5 million followers, look, the world as we know it is ending. Everyone who isn't in our group is going to be destroyed. So, bearing all of this in mind, you'd better give your all. You'd better stay united. You'd better stay in this religion that's so easily debunked by doing research online. Because if you don't do what we want you to do, if you don't meet our expectations, you deserve to be destroyed along with the rest of the system of things. If that's your best way of motivating people, what does that say about you? Isn't this really exactly the sort of behavior you would expect from a toxic, narcissistic group of leaders? And that's what we're seeing on full display here. And isn't it telling as well that Ken Cook, when he's spouting all of this nonsense, he never is brave enough to give us anything specific, is he? Everything's always vague. We already heard him say,
We are living in the last days of the time of the end.
oh, are we, Ken? We're living in the last days, are we? Well, thank you for being so specific there. Thank you for saying something about the future that you can be held accountable for if it doesn't come true. Which takes me back to what I was saying before about falsifiable or unfalsifiable predictions. If you're making a prediction that is unfalsifiable, that you can't be held accountable for because it's vague, that sort of calls into question whether you really believe what you're saying. And we now enter into the whole realm of, do the governing body really believe this stuff? And I think personally that to at least some degree they do buy into their own BS. But isn't it interesting that they never hold themselves, or very rarely do they hold themselves, to a specific timescale? In the past, of course, they did hold themselves to a specific timescale. Charles Taze Russell, 1914, Joseph Rutherford, 1925, the Nathan Knorr era, 1975. But this group of leaders, they won't do that, will they? They won't say, well, it's coming so soon that we can confidently say it will be within, say, the next 5 years or the next 10 years. Isn't that interesting? They can only ever be vague and say it's soon or in the near future. Well, what does that tell us exactly, Ken Cook? You're expecting 8.5 million followers to orient their lives around such vague predictions involving the last days or things that will happen soon or in the near future. Why don't you just stick your neck out and give us a time frame? If it's so imminent, if you're so convinced about all of this, and if you really care about the millions of people who follow you, why can't you treat them like adults and stick your neck out and give us a time span. I would submit that the reason why you don't stick your neck out and give us a time span is because at some level, even you don't really believe this. You're just going along with what you're supposed to go along with and doing what's expected of you in an organization that incidentally is benefiting you by giving you the power and prestige that you crave.